tap, tap, tap. Wrist on glitter, waist on thinner. I'ma show you how to bag an 8-figure nigga. Base on zaddy, pockets on jigger. You better get the card and make it swipe like Tinder.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Thank you so much for talking to me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So I happened to come across you on TikTok For You page, and the content you were talking about relating to end-of-life care is stuff that I don't really hear a lot of people talking about. So it kind of made me think more about like what that is and what that life entails, and sort of like just that scope of the world that I'm just not super familiar with. And I think among that app, that's something that stood out to me of like very unique and very, inspiring. And I'd love for you to be able to share, what you do and what end of life care means for you and your family.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, you found me on TikTok. I just actually like a month and a half ago, because of COVID, I downloaded it to start putting what I call just alternative lifestyle blogging. I don't know if you saw our family lifestyle blog, but we have stuff on there too, just about our day-to-day life, and it's all kinds of stuff, but it's really to show people like what you saw, these little clips of what life is like and this idea. And I have given a couple presentations about this, but it's so important. And I was actually really excited when you reached out to me about it. I was like, oh my gosh. I told my partner, Chad, I'm like, I can't believe someone's asking me to talk about this, because I have been dying to give like a real talk, like a heart to heart, like, everyone, you can go through her personal Facebook page. That's actually where I started doing it. I started live streaming from the hospital in 2015. So people that are new to my daughter or me, I'm 30. I have 2 children. I had 3 late losses before my oldest daughter. My oldest daughter was born 12 weeks early. She weighed 2 pounds. And so starting out being a mom, I had no idea what to expect. I'd never been around people with disabilities on that level before. So it was a whole new world. And I always tell people, when they look at where I'm at now and they're like, oh my God, I don't know how you do it, especially moms or even new doctors. I really just loved her, and I knew that I had to fight for her, and that was it. I didn't know about the medical stuff. It was just, a learning process. And when I brought her home, I slowly started noticing that there was just something different. And a couple days before her first birthday, we had been going to, at that point, about 8 or 9 different clinics for various things. Like I said, I noticed she was just different. And I got her genetic diagnosis of Zellweger syndrome. So Zellweger syndrome is a disease that destroys the white matter of the brain. It affects all major systems of the body, and most children don't live past 12 months. Maddie is 7.5. So that's another miraculous part of her story is, I believe, because like her mother, she's stubborn as hell, and she has a true desire to live. There is nothing keeping her here other than her sheer desire to live. And she has been my inspiration. I mean, she's 7 and she doesn't talk, but that kid will teach you more about life in just spending an hour with her. I tell people, when you see what she has to go through, and she communicates through facial expressions, and she makes noises, and she'll say hi and mama, and she does a little bit of sign language. So you can understand her. But again, she's really shown me what life is really all about. I actually, when she first got put on hospice care, which was in 2015, so she's been in end-of-life care for 5 years. When I was told, this is it, she's going to die, I published a book of poetry called Just Breathe, Baby. And I tell people, something that I sometimes have to tell myself on bad days is just breathe. Like, that's it. Just be okay with that. Because, I think sometimes we take for granted those little things. And those are the things that I think help put the death into perspective. So this is the topic. This is the part of the conversation that everyone's like, oh my God, okay, pause. Let's not talk about this. But death is probably the most beautiful part of life. And if you can acknowledge that it is a piece of it and it's a part of the process, it's not easy. I know that when Maddie leaves, it's going to be the hardest day of my life. In fact, we have created a plan for what her end of life will look like. And for her, we're having a harpist come play. I had my wedding dress cut to her size, so that's the first and only white dress she wears, a blanket of her baby clothes that she'll be wrapped in. And so we have a plan of this beautiful plan for when that happens. And not only do I feel like that, acknowledging that it is going to happen and making those plans. But like I said before, I've had 3 late losses, and I know what it's like to not plan, to have a child die. You're supposed to bring a baby home from the hospital, not a box. And I had to do that 3 times before I had Maddie. And I was not prepared to plan a funeral for a child. And so sadly, my experience with losing babies brought me to this place of, I was in denial for, I would say, the first 2 months that she got really sick. Like, this can't be it. This can't be it. But again, I think that's important for people like you who've never experienced, like, wow, this is their every single day of their life. I couldn't imagine that. And I always tell people, especially when they come from that place of, think of it like if you've ever seen or heard of people who have cancer, you really do have this moment, this aha moment. So it's kind of that, like, try to put yourself in those shoes. Like, what if you couldn't walk? What if you couldn't talk for yourself? What if you had the words in your head, you just couldn't speak them out loud, and you start to really think about, those little things, like I said, that I think we take for granted so much. And especially in the age of instant gratification, you go online or you buy something and you can get it that same day, or you can get it that next day. And that's, again, like what Maddie has taught me, like, slow down, take a moment, breathe. You might not have this moment ever again. And again, like I said, Maddie has gratefully been here for now 5 years past the point when they told me to take her home. And it's not because she's gotten better. She's gotten worse. About 1.5 years ago, she went into end-stage liver failure. So we go to the hospital every 14 to 20 days for her to get blood. But in between those days, we now, because of COVID, we stay at home. She's got this big thing. This pink thing is a swing for her. So she could swing. Pre-COVID, we would plan like beach days or park days. I mean, this kid's been on an airplane like 8 times. So we don't let what her circumstance has done to her physical body affect her life. So, that's another big thing too. A lot of people hear terminal or end of life and they're like, oh, that's it. You just got to be right here. And that's not true. I think, again, that's that moment where you need to breathe and just be like, okay, I'm going to take this in and I'm going to run with it because that's all I can do. And again, for us, that's how we live. It's very much like we want people to see that, yes, we're strong, but we're not stronger than any other person. We don't have superpowers. We were given this child who has these circumstances. And honestly, I'm grateful because now, thinking even about like my own death, and I'm only 30, but I definitely think about it a lot more now having Maddie, like what would my plan look like? And what do I want that to be? And, there are so many other cultures that embrace this idea of death being a beautiful thing. And I think America, again, just because we have so much media and that instant gratification, and especially lately, the last couple of years, we will support certain causes, but then we don't want to talk about the ones that are really hard. Like we'll talk about the healthcare system, but we won't talk about end of life care and how important it is, but how little people know about it unless you're doing it.
Right. Do you ever experience the side of the situation where people feel like because it's a terminal diagnosis, the attention to that person isn't fully there anymore? Do you ever see people that consider that the end of, they don't consider there to be any hope?
Yeah. And honestly, sadly, we have very few people that are close to us because of that. And, you know, me and my partner have opened up Maddie's end of life to our families, our very close families. Like, do you want to be there? Do you not? And I will say that there are a lot of people that since we started having those talks don't really come around. They don't really call. And again, it's very hard for some people. Some people will not acknowledge it at all. And in society, we get a lot of, I mean, going anywhere with her, people just don't quite know. I mean, she looks so different. You can tell there's something going on, but a lot of times it's not like anything anyone's seen. So they have a lot of questions. We get, you know, the really like, I can tell people when they glare, it's mostly out of fear. And I only know that because I've been her mom for so long now that the stares are not anything new, you know? And again, when people hear that terminal, then it's always like, oh my gosh, wow. And a lot of times that's why, you know, when I will start talking about Maddie, I won't necessarily say she's terminal right away. I might just say something like she's an advanced liver failure, but despite everything that she has going on, she's one of the most amazing people you'll ever meet. And a lot of times starting a conversation like that and working somebody into it helps. And I think that's another thing too. The way death has been framed is terrible. There haven't been many, I've seen a couple advocates, like on TED Talks recently, some terminally ill patients that have spoken about end of life care and kind of, you know, like I am doing now, very candidly talking about the experience. Whereas before, it was framed in this one way, and it was framed in a way that made people afraid of it, and it was very serious, and it had to be this super hyper emotional thing. And I think, you know, again, by like I said, we talk about it every day. And I think that's something that if other people started doing that, like, you know, it's one of those hard things, but it's kind of like when we think about race, you know, there's been a lot of racial equality issues coming back up. And people are like, what's going on? It's like, well, those real conversations never continued. We just kind of stopped them. And then it became socially unacceptable to even have conversations that now people are having to be like, oh, this is okay. It's like, well, that should have been okay before. And again, I think it's that same with end of life care. I think a lot of times, and this is something that it bothers me that people are scared to ask questions sometimes. A lot of times when people reach out about the end of life care, they're like, oh, are you okay talking about this? And I'm like, yeah, let's talk about it. But again, it's just because we've been taught that it's this hyper emotional, it's this sad place. You don't go there, you don't talk about it. But if you, again, reframe and you, again, I have learned a lot of tools to help other people because, you know, when you're at a grocery store and somebody asks you her diagnosis, I have to have like 20 words that I can say and not break somebody's heart or make them cry before we leave. So a lot of times starting out, like I said, with a primary diagnosis that's not necessarily end of life because that scares people, and then saying something really good about her and her personality, and then maybe saying, you know, she's in hospice care. I say that a lot. Hospice care, a lot of people are like, oh, okay, what does that mean? And a lot of people are more comfortable asking about hospice care because a lot of people, if they've never known someone on hospice, they don't even know what it is. And that a lot of times, again, it's a little bit more comfortable. Trigger words are a thing. And I think that's another thing too, as advocates, as good advocates, it's important you change your verbiage. And I've had to change my verbiage. Like I said, I've had to learn over the course of Maddie's life, when I'm in a conversation with somebody, what's triggering them? Oh, when I say end of life care and do not resuscitate, people get really nervous and they don't want to talk about it. If you say things like hospice care, and we don't allow certain medical procedures to be done on her anymore, people are still engaging in the conversation and they're not so inwardly like, okay, this scares me, this worries me, I don't know that I want to talk about this, I'm a little uncomfortable, you know. I think that, again, communication is so important, and we've started really lacking that communication to start having these talks. So I think it's on one part, it's society's job to ask the questions, you know, whatever it's about, ask. But then also, again, as an advocate or somebody who wants to explain it to someone, whether it's, you know, a doctor or somebody like me who's a parent, being able to frame your words in a way that don't shock and awe, that really help people ask questions like, oh, well, what does that mean for you? And, you know, if somebody wants to know all the medical things she will and won't have done, a lot of times I will start listing them because people get bored after a few. Like, you start going through, like, she won't have surgeries, you know, she won't have breathing tubes put in. We absolutely are like, no chest compressions. You know, there's a lot of different things that we're like, okay, this wouldn't happen. And again, you start going through the list and people are like, okay, yeah, I'm done. I don't want to hear anymore. So
how did you get to the point where you're able to respond so, I don't want to say positively, but so normally when somebody's saying, oh, I'm so sorry? I'm sure that's a reaction that you get all the time. How do you change that narrative?
I honestly, because so my losses were really late in pregnancy, like 6 months, 5 months, and 7.5 months. So when I had those losses, the I'm sorries and like, oh, you'll get pregnant again, were like everywhere. So I learned to, I'll say, put on face when those compliments would come. And then I had to learn, okay, how do I respond to this and not be upset? So just like when you respond to an emergency situation, right? Let's say somebody stops breathing and collapses in front of you, right? There are people that will stand there and do nothing. And there are people that can turn on this part of themselves and just be. And for Maddie, in those moments, I have learned to just be. And again, it's not come easy. There have been times over 7 years, like I said, where I used to say, oh yeah, you know, she has a terminal diagnosis. And I would say she has a rare disease a lot for a long time. I would say things like, you know, end of life care. She has a do not resuscitate order. And again, really starting to notice and pay attention to the conversations I was having with people. You know, something I think a lot of people are afraid of is self-evaluation. And especially over the last couple of years, I've gotten really real with myself about the way I presented that information. And again, as an effective advocate, I felt it was my job to start paying attention to the conversations I was having with people, because, you know, it isn't until recently that I've really started getting more attention about what I've been talking about for years, this idea of reframing how we think about death and end of life. But it was a journey for me. Again, self-evaluation is something that people loathe, and most people will deny that they have any problem. But if you aren't communicating something to someone, or you don't understand something, you have a problem too. So that's, again, why, you know, people, again, like you say, oh, you come across so positive about this. And I always tell people, you know, this is what I was born to do. I have no explanation as to why I can talk about what I talk about with my daughter, other than this is the gift I was given. I will talk your damn ear off. And I have good days and I have bad days. And that is another big piece. And I think what is so important about the message that I share about end of life care is that while I am here talking to you and I am fine, you know, 4.5 weeks ago, I was a shit show for 3 days straight. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I was crying in my room. I had to have my partner like convince me that I was going to be okay, like that it was okay. And I think that's another part that people need to acknowledge is absolutely okay. Break down. It's okay. Like, it's normal, and it's going to make you stronger. And again, that self-evaluation, you know, I am only able to be positive because I know, like, in my heart of hearts, that no matter what, I can have hope. Like, I really cling to that. And I have anxiety. I have complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I do weekly counseling. So again, like, I love that people are so empowered by what I say and how I say it. And I always tell people, you know, I was given this gift to deliver this message. I know it. I have no explanation as to why I can do these things other than, you know, I'm a writer. I love words. I love books. I love people. And I am probably one of the most passionate people you'll ever meet in your life. And again, I'm stubborn as hell. And I think this, you know, this idea of death and dying, this dark thing, it's not dark. And sadly, it's been the biggest part of my adult life. I started out 19 years old. I lost my first baby. 20, I lost my second. 21, I lost my third. I got pregnant with Maddie 6 weeks later. I had a loss January of 2012 and then delivered Maddie November 2012. And so my journey of being a mom and being an adult and learning about life has been learning about death. I have had to let go of the most precious things in the world to me. And then when I finally do have that miracle child, I'm told, well, you're going to have to give her back. So you better cherish that. And, you know, it really was this, when Maddie was born, it was just this light bulb of, you have to protect her. You have to love her. And when I started talking to other people, at first it was nurses in the hospital. And they were like, you need to talk to our director. And I started volunteering at the hospital. I actually started doing a parent-to-parent program where I would go in and talk to moms who had lost babies in the newborn intensive care, or moms that had come in and had miscarriages and were having a really hard time in the ultrasound room. I'd go in and just talk to them. Not about medical stuff. I'd just be there as someone who could say, you know what, you're not alone and it's okay to feel like this. And again, doing those things and slowly seeing that, you know what, this idea that we have to, you know, be so proper about it and it's going to be okay, or we're totally falling apart. No, both of those things are totally okay. But we still have to acknowledge, you know, again, the issue.
Yeah. And I think one thing that I've noticed, sort of, whether it be somebody that I don't realize is in end-of-life care, but anybody sort of with a disability, there's almost this thing that I've noticed socially where people don't want to look at them or don't think that they can hear them or understand them. How capable is Maddie of understanding, like, you and what you're saying, and you're her mom? What level of consciousness does she have?
Very. Maddie is very, very smart. So what they mark her cognitively is 2 years old, which is amazing. I mean, most Zellweger babies don't get past about 6 months. But because she understands so much, she has a lot of receptive communication, which she has, again, lost some skills over the last couple years. Like her muscles have gotten a little bit tighter, but she understands everything. And she understands, like, I know it's not a coincidence because it's been 7 years that when people are rude to us in public, she gets upset or she'll turn her head away from them. I've seen her wave bye to them, like, excuse me, you know, she is very aware of what is going on. And that, I think too, and this is something, on one hand, we get a lot of people that hate it. And it's sad that it's all a lack of understanding. But we also get people that will come up to us so randomly and be like, I just had to be near her. She knows what's going on. And I'm like, you get it. You totally get it. And they'll start talking to her. And they'll be like, oh, look, she's saying hi. I'm like, okay, it's not. And you know it's not just you. You know she's doing these things. And Maddie, again, is one of those people. If you look on her Facebook, I document everything. I started doing little videos. Honestly, at first, it was to prove to her therapists because they would come over and she would fall asleep. So I started recording her doing things as a baby. Like before she had seizures in 2015, she was sitting with little support. She could roll over. She was army crawling. I mean, she, again, has about a 200-word sign vocabulary. At one point, she could physically do all of those signs. Now they're a little bit more modified, and she kind of keeps them closer to her body. But again, Maddie communicates. And communication, like I was talking about earlier, is one of those things that we are so out of tune with. We expect someone, and this just, so Maddie's what you would call deafblind, even though she can see, she can not see like the definition of your face, so she can't really see what your eye color is, and she can't really see how big or small your nose is, or your lips, or your ears, but she could see your shape, and like your shirt's stripes, she could probably, it would look like a black block to her, and then she could probably see your red hair because it's really bright. But again, so most people who are deafblind, she was just deafblind and had nothing else wrong with her. I have worked with several deafblind people. I've taught webinars for the National Center for Deafblindness. Deafblind people, and even just deaf or blind people, are some of the most underrepresented people and underappreciated. People really underestimate what they can and can't do, especially, like you said, when it comes to intelligence and cognizance. You know, they assume that because they can't hear or speak or do the things that we normally do in communications, what's considered normal, which I really don't like that word. I feel like, you know, with this uprising of autism and realizing how differently autistic kids communicate, I mean, it is such a huge part of their life, is building a strong communication system that works for them and a schedule that works for them. You know, when we think about other kinds of people, I don't think we spend enough time saying, okay, this is my language, and this is what I try to tell people who have a hard time understanding. Think of other communication methods, whether it's sign language or an actual other language like Greek or Spanish or whatever that you don't understand, or like Maddie uses sign language, she uses facial expressions, she uses body gestures, she also uses noises too, certain noises, and voice fluctuations, like instead of I love you, she'll say but you can tell that that's what that means, especially because a lot of times you'll ask her and that's her response, and then she tries to give you a kiss. So you know, when we think of it more like, okay, this is her language, and I have never spoken Maddieese in my life before, so I need to learn it before I can judge and say that it's not there and it's wrong. And that, I think, is the piece that a lot of people miss, is they automatically assume, oh, they don't talk, so they must not have cognizance, when really some of the most intelligent people I have come across do not speak actual words. In the disability community, I have been so fortunate to come across some amazing adults that do things that Maddie will never do. But seeing, like, there's a woman I follow, she is completely immobilized, and she writes a blog with her mouth. And it is the most amazing thing. She can't speak, but she uses like breath movements to relay on this relay system and type for her. And when you read her blog, you would never guess that that's what she's doing, because she sounds like any other disability blogger. And those are the things too that, again, I've learned over the years, you know, how do I talk about this to people? And again, we have to look at it like it's a language. Everybody has their own language. Even though you and I speak English, you know, we definitely have different communication styles and different ways that we talk. And so, you know, each time we interact, that would get better and better. And I think a lot of times if people can, instead of looking at what can't this person do, ask yourself, what can I do with this person to help? And a lot of times, you know, I tell people, a lot of people will say, well, how do I talk to her? What do I do? What do I say? And that really is the best question to ask somebody that's with somebody that's disabled. Ask their caregiver, how do they communicate? Can I talk to them? Period. That would make their day. Especially because they don't get that, you know, especially people like Maddie. Again, nonverbal communication is so big, and it's one of those things that I think, again, as a society, it's like death. We don't talk about it. We don't want to talk about it. No. Well, yes. Let's communicate about this thing that shouldn't actually really be a thing because it's been around forever.
Right. And so how much of an age difference do your daughters have?
They're very close. So they are 6 and 7.
So how, and your other daughter, does she have any disability?
No, Nope. I was
How
supposed
do
to
you?
get my tubes tied, and she, surprise! You're having one more, and she's perfectly healthy. So it was this like, it's like a funny, I say it's a sense of humor. Like, oh, haha, it took you this long to have one. Now you have two back to back. And
Yeah.
my youngest is, you know, she really is, for me, when I see how she talks about it, and she's 6, so now we don't have her next to us as much when we talk to doctors, because we have to talk to them about it. Once a month, we have a really in-depth conversation. Every 6 months, we have like a 2-hour sit down, and we really talk about it. So again, it's a huge part of my life. And she doesn't sit right next to us, but she has all kinds of books about death. When a Dinosaur Dies, Lifetimes, you know, we have tons of books about death and dying. It is a huge part of her life. And when you see the way Olivia interacts with it, like, you know, if a bug dies, she'll be like, oh, it's gone forever now. Whereas most kids would obsess over, where did this bug go? When is it coming back? And, you know, that's also a twofold. Olivia has, you know, this also sense of, you know, she doesn't want people to leave. We had a really hard time when she was younger. We've really had to work with her on, you know, just because somebody's gone doesn't mean they're gone forever. But again, I think that's why it's so important. She's so fortunate to have Maddie in her life, to start learning from birth what death is all about. And she will have such a profound experience of, this is what it looks like. And it's not as bad as you think it is, because my parents normalized it for me, and they taught me that it was okay. And you know, that's something that in our house we always, especially with our kids, tell them that it's okay to be emotional, but you have to communicate those emotions. And so, you know, it's kind of funny sometimes. She'll come out and go, I'm frustrated, or I'm sad. But, you know, I know that when her sister does leave, it's important that she can talk to me about her emotions, because I want her to be able to be like, I'm sad. And I'm like, why? She goes, well, Sissy's not here anymore. And those are those kinds of conversations that even right now at 6 years old, I know I could have with her, because she understands how she feels and what's going on with her body, you know. And those are things, like I said, I'm 30. I didn't start learning that really. I mean, 2015, when I was 25, when Maddie got really, really sick, and they were like, you need to sign these papers and we really need to talk about this. That's when death became very real to me. My losses gave me the momentum to push forward and have hope for Maddie. But when it was really put in my face, and they made me, you know, all of the things you have to do, choosing a funeral home and all those things that for 5 years, it's a big part of my life. In that moment of like, okay, this is real, and I really need to get real with how I feel about it. And that's what I said, self-reflection. Like, you know, I went along the first 2 years of her life thinking I was okay with everything, until it was time to have that real talk. And I was like, I don't want to talk about this. And I had to kind of give myself a reality check. Like, this is a part of life, and you need to help other people. And again, when I made those plans for her, and again, like I said, I update her plans all the time. Me and my partner talk about it every single day, because it's a big part of our life. We have started normalizing death, and we have made death a part of our life, so much so that we're not scared of it. We're not afraid to talk to other people about it. And we're even at a point where we want to help other people see that even actively going through something like, you know, a lot of people look at our life and go, oh, it's so tragic. And we really sit down and talk to them like I am you, and show them that it's actually not. We're just real people. And yeah, some days really suck, but for the most part, our life is awesome. And I am so grateful that I have somebody like her in my life, because I don't take anything for granted. Breathing, eating, walking, nothing, talking. Like, I know that the reason I've been a talker since I was a little kid. You could never get me to shut up. And it's funny, even my parents, like when I started first doing motivational speaking, they said, we should have known, like, you love to give, you have the gift of gab, like you love to talk to people. And like I said, it started out just talking to nurses, and they're like, wow, I love how open you are about what's going on, because I wasn't afraid to ask stupid questions, or, you know, I wanted to do everything for her, and I would ask about equipment. And, you know, I have like 20 certifications for medical stuff for Maddie, not because I have to, because I just wanted to make sure that I knew how to do those things. And again, that's, again, asking questions. Like, I think as a society, a lot of times people see disability in a way that, you know, we've seen religion or race for a long time. Like, don't go there, don't talk about it. Even politics, kind of, with some people, you just don't want to talk about it. And I don't feel like that's completely true. We just need to make sure that we are communicating better. And, you know, a lot of times people want to get defensive. And so, again, that's why I said, when you're talking to a person, both people have to be aware, especially when it's something that could be triggering to another person. Like, if somebody's talking to you and they don't know anything about end of life care, don't say end of life care or do not resuscitate or dead or death in your first like 20 words, because they're probably gonna go to a dark place. And if you can start with, you know what, it sucks, but for the most part, it's great, that does something to people. It turns them from, oh my God, this is so sad, to, I've never actually thought of it like it could be a happy thing before. And look, you're just a normal person. You're not like doing some, you know, this is no put on. Like, this is who we are. This is what we do. Our child's dying, but it's not the worst thing in the world. You know, I can probably think of 5 or 6 other situations of children that have medical needs that I think is much worse than what I'm going through, you know. And that's also too, and this is something I've talked about for years, is perspective. Changing the way you see something, which is very hard for people. You know, stop, take that moment of pause and say, what is it about this person, this topic, that makes me so uncomfortable that I can't even create a perspective for it, because I'm just so shocked. You can't even get past, like, I don't comprehend, because I don't know, you know. I think if people take that moment, like, okay, let's put this into perspective, start asking yourself, how can I relate to this? What does this make me think? Is there somebody or some way I can ask a question? You know, a lot of times, again, people are afraid to ask these questions. I don't know any special needs parent or caregiver that is shut off from talking about how they feel about their child or person's disabilities. I mean, anyone. Like, I would say you would probably, again, make their day to say hi, how can I communicate with you? Or, you know, I, again, even have people ask, well, what does she have? That's a big one. And then they'll say, I'm sorry for asking. Like, don't be sorry. This should be normal, you know? Someone asks you your age, for me, it's kind of the same thing. Her diagnosis is a part of who she is. And we also have never shamed her diagnosis. I've never looked at it like it was a bad thing. It's sad and the side effects suck, but the person that she is because of it is something I would never, ever change.
Right. And I think doing TikTok and all of the social medias is something that's definitely a good tool to, you know, educate people, or just share your emotions or your life, or just to feel like you're not in your own bubble all the time. So I think, of course, unfortunately, there are going to be people who, maybe not online, but maybe in person as well, either scroll along and see it and say, oh my gosh, that's so sad, I don't want to look at it. Or who see you guys in person and say to their friends or family, oh my gosh, look, that's so sad, and then they walk away. But what do you hope, the people that do stick around, what are you hoping that the reaction is? What is your goal for other people to know about your family and your life, and just end of life care in general?
My goal would really be empowering people to start talking about death. Make it a normal part of your life. Don't make it scary. Talk about it. Even if you literally start talking to yourself, like, you know, everyone should have self-reflection. If you're not doing it, do it. When you reflect selfly, even if it's for 5 minutes, think about it. What do you want your death to look like? Do you want to have people that you care about around you? You know, how is it going to make you feel if you got sick? You know, think about those things before they happen. I'm not telling people to get all anxious and stress out about things that you probably don't need to worry about, but really think about it. You know, if you're married or you have a spouse or even a serious boyfriend, how would you feel if your boyfriend died? Have you had that conversation? Like, what if one of us dies? If you haven't, maybe have it. And again, that's a way to start normalizing it. Talk about it to people you know closely. And then eventually, like me, like I said, I didn't just start talking to everybody at first because we were in the hospital. It was talking to doctors and nurses about it and getting comfortable with even having that conversation. And again, I had a lot of conversations with myself, like, how do I feel about this? What about this makes me so uncomfortable? What do I need to address in myself, you know, again, that is bothering me about this? And again, I think, you know, and you'll even see if people do start thinking about death every day, you'll see how it becomes just a normal part of your life. So then when you're out in public and somebody says, you know, you see somebody, let's say you see a man with oxygen and he's bald. You walk up to him, oh, excuse me, sir, do you have cancer? No, I did. I'm actually terminal and I'm in end of life care. You're not going to be as shocked by it as if you hadn't started reflecting on death and what it means. And I also implore people, you know, if you really start getting curious, start looking into it. Start looking into, well, what does that mean? And what is end of life care? And, you know, you can go in so many directions with thinking about death, you know, depending on your religion, depending on just your spiritual beliefs, depending on who you are as a person. Like I said, your detailed plans, making a plan for yourself. Everybody's different and everybody's going to have a way of making themselves more comfortable about death. I am comfortable with talking about it. I found that when I had my losses, it helped me to talk about what was going on and how I felt instead of keeping it all inside. Because as soon as I started shutting down, then I felt like I was suffocating. And then when people would bring up the passing of my babies, I would be like, no, don't, just stop. We're done. But I started, again, getting real with myself, like, okay, you should talk about this. And I started talking about it to people. And I'm like, this is how it makes me feel. And it sucks. And people loved it. And I was like, okay, let's do this more. Let's talk about how we really feel. And again, make it a part of your day-to-day life. Talk to yourself. Start talking to yourself. Start talking to your friends about it. You know, that's another way to connect with people. And this is something, because death is such a big part of my life, anyone that's close to me is very, very close to me, because they know at some point I'm going to have this intimate moment where I really need people. And I think that just because Maddie's dying, I wish I would have done that years ago. Like when I was 18 or 19 with my girlfriends, I probably would have still been girlfriends with some of them because I would have built this bond of like, let's talk about death. And, you know, have you ever talked to your friends about death? Probably not, but you probably should, especially if they're your best friend. Like, hey, let's get real. Like, have you ever thought about, like, how would you feel if I died? Would it completely ruin you, you know? And having those conversations, those super uncomfortable conversations with the people closest to you. So that way, like you said, when you do come across a video like Maddie's, it's more of this moment of, wow, this empowers me even more to see that what I'm doing, this self-reflection, this making this normalization, it's important, because when I get to that place, I know it's not going to be so overwhelming.
Well, I want you to know, just from my personal view, I think the goal that you're trying to achieve, you're definitely succeeding, because just me going through, you do see a lot, anything that's about disabilities, sometimes you see things that are just very sad, like, this is what has happened to me, this is my story. And yes, it's powerful, but it doesn't make you, for me, it doesn't make me very curious of anything. It just overall makes me sad. But your video was very different because it didn't look like anything negative at all. Like I had to watch it a few times. I was like, first I just thought it was a cute dancing, and then I was like, oh, this girl has a disability. And then it was like, reading about like, oh, she loves music, she loves this. And I was thinking like, wow, so many people that are out here representing disabilities even don't talk about, oh, this is what she likes, this is what she does, this is how she lives her life. She's like a normal person. It's not like this like deformed, like end of life, you're messed up, something's wrong with you, like so sad. I think you present it in such a way that really drew me in and made me want to know more about Maddie and more about just this end of life care process in general, and how, you know, if you're showing that it's not sad, it's, I mean, of course, at times it's heartbreaking, but it's not, it shouldn't be something that you can't discuss or you shouldn't know about or you just don't talk about it. But I really want to thank you for being so open with me, and I learned a lot. So I hope anybody that watches this also can learn as much as they can from you, because I think this voice is something that I definitely do not see a lot. So I really, really appreciate you being so willing to just share your experiences and have really no boundaries as far as conversations go, because that's really where you learn. That is when you learn. Once you have something where you're a topic where you have no limits to what you're going to say about that topic, I think that's when people really are enlightened. So I thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you. And like you're saying, you know, what I love to tell people about Maddie is the things that they can relate to, all those things. And like you said, it makes you stop and go, what the heck? Because I take a video like Tap Tap and me and Maddie dance to it, because why not? Maddie's favorite artists are like Five Finger Death Punch, which is hardcore heavy metal, Snoop Dogg, Cypress Hill. I mean, this kid rocks out. Like, she has no boundaries. And I never set limits to like, oh, you can only listen to Mozart and baby stuff. No, girl, you can listen to whatever you want. And I have YouTube videos of her listening to hip hop and listening to, you know, heavy metal. And we have videos of her at music festivals right next to the speakers while somebody's performing hip hop right next to her, and she's rocking out. Giving people those relative things like football, Disney, music, that they go, wait, I like those things. And this is a little, oh, wow, we're just alike. Start that conversation with people. And that's why, like I said, and I'm really grateful that you found me, because again, this message is so important. And the more people that can see that, just have a conversation with somebody. Stop being so afraid of yourself and of what other people are going to think, and just open your damn mouth.
Well, keep doing what you're doing for sure, because it's helping a lot of people, I think.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
Have a good day.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.